Hey everybody, welcome back to the Lost Beat 6 show. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for stumbling on this podcast. If it's your first time listening with us. I'm going to do all that crazy stuff that everybody's supposed to do to get people to get this show, which is like and subscribe. No, it's not like and subscribe. It's give us, they're supposed to say give us 5 stars. I'm not really, I don't know why it's always sort of disingenuous, but apparently that's how you get the algorithms to do these things to make sure we get spread. But anyway, if you actually like the show, you give us the whole 5-star thing. If you don't like the show, give us 1 star. If you give us like 3 stars, that means we're doing okay, because I think the average figures it all out. Anyway, if you subscribe for more stuff, we do try to put out stuff when we can, best we can. This is oftentimes like a, we've been a little bit busier than normal with things kind of getting back to work as it is, as we all have our jobs and such that fund this thing, because we have no ads and we don't really want them, so that's what we got to do. So anyway, we might have a way to figure out if you like the show and you want to support it. If you do support this, please tell us about it. Like, I don't know, we got our Instagram and we have a Facebook. Not a lot of people on. We don't like Facebook, but we got it. And this, hit us up and say hi, because I want to make sure that you guys aren't like bots. Anyway, we're glad you're here, bots or not, and we have a great show for you today. Casey Edwards is our guest. He's a composer, producer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist. His work spans across the mediums of film, TV, video games, as well as his own standalone work. On this episode, we got a shout out to Ryan Pressman, our MVP on this episode. He pretty much runs this whole show, and that's what we kind of like to do. Is we all bring in different guests, and sometimes it's just me talking to a guest, or talking to a friend, and sometimes it's if we have our little collective at Lost Beat 6, and if anybody wants to talk to somebody and we get them on the show, they can run the show. It's kind of, we try to distribute the power in the conversation to the people who want to learn the most. I think that's kind of what I've learned this podcast is about, is basically setting up it's like a master class that we can, or a lecture or a session that we can learn how to be. We could live off our creativity or live off our craft, and we like to bring on people that are successful and have a living and can support themselves in a family, pick the brain, and gain insight on how we ourselves can tap into this creative. I say creative, but essentially, living for yourself. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking here, and we're going to get on with the show, and I hope you enjoy it. And we're back. Okay, cool.
And we're back. Yeah, are you going to do the whole welcome thing and all that, or
I can.
You do a better job of that than I do, because you've done that a million times.
I'll do that then. Okay.
You're better. You do that all the time. So.
Well, welcome, Casey, to the Lost Beat 6 show. We're glad you're on board with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm not usually that busy, but having a kid put a new wrench into the works for us this year, so I'm learning.
It's a whole. How old is you said he? It's a
yeah,
boy?
he turns 7 months tomorrow.
Oh, you're in that wonderful sleepless phase then, or just getting through it.
It's you never really know what kind of night you're gonna have. Last 2 nights have been really great, but you also never know what kind of days you're gonna have, which is usually more important for me. I can go on less sleep rather than less work.
Okay, right on.
So the daytime productivity has been definitely a learning curve, but we're getting there.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Ryan, yeah, how you doing? You're good?
I'm never better.
Things are fine?
Yeah, Ryan, how are you doing? Tell us more. Tell us more about your day.
Well, I've just been really busy lately. I got to go take a COVID test later, and it's just gonna be it's a whole mess. But yeah, I got to finish a Fiverr gig before the end of this, before Sunday is out. So
this is your Jeopardy gig, right? Can
Yeah.
we talk about this? I know we have a guest, but can we bring this
I think
up?
you can actually.
Please.
Well, this is gonna have to be redacted from the podcast, I think. But yeah, I'm gonna be on the show Jeopardy, and I have to take a COVID test before I go on it. So yeah, that'll be cool and fun.
Well, I'm glad Aaron Rodgers is not on this one. So that's
Yeah,
good.
I want
He's
to get
not
sick.
hosting
So
it.
You have like the literal 200 IQ.
yeah,
That's
he
great.
did.
I'm basically useless without a guitar in my hand. So I'm always impressed when people are actually, intelligent. That's really impressive. I've thought about it before, like, oh my God, what would I do if people weren't paying me to write music? And I have nothing.
I have the opposite problem, but I would like it's like, hey, no, more music stuff and not this. Like, I'm glad I learned a bunch of random trivia in high school. That was cool. But yeah, I mean, it'll be fun.
That's awesome.
But
Yeah, most
anyway.
of mine, like even like the entrepreneurial spirit of being a composer these days. I mean, you start to be a little multifaceted, but it's all still like wrapped in music. Like I do contact programming because I used to be a dual major back in college where I studied like Java and software engineering and stuff. But I quit to be full-time music, and I kind of just moved all those interests back into music again, which was programming music stuff. So
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you say that because I used to work. I mean, not I used to. I still do. I've worked in the video game world and everything. As my first gig was like a guy I found over Reddit was like his music director, and we met. He flew me out to work in person a few times. And when we were doing that, he was like watching me do stuff and like with MIDI and with like MuseScore and like scoring software, and he's like. This is very like programmatic. This is just programming, but for like instruments and stuff. I was like, kind of, yeah. Like this is if you kind of look, you can look at it that way, sure.
that was definitely my introduction to like video game implementation software, like Wise and Fmod. Like, I mean, you literally have to ask the programmers to put in callbacks for you to even be able to use as a musician. And I think there's additional coding that you can do in Wise to callback stuff, and you have to kind of think with that other side of your brain to make it work. Like the left and right need to come together for the creative and the very non-subjective part of that. Very scheduling oriented.
Yes, I have a lot of respect for middleware guys because they're like you said, Fmod and Wise users. Because I'm just like, dang, that's using a lot of your brain to make all that kind of work. But actually, that brings me to an interesting point because. I was doing research for this podcast. I was like, okay, I found out that you had a coding background or a programmatic background, and I was I guess you kind of started the conversation yourself. Is like, how do you apply your programming skills to musical stuff aside from just aside from the technical? Of course, you use middleware like Fmod and Wise, but like, is there anything where you go, okay? For music, I can actually like stuff I learned in programming is helpful, like, or even if it's just like habits or behaviors or mindsets.
One of the first ones was just like, I don't want to say hacking into, but changing contact instruments that I use. I'm assuming most of your listeners know about contact or virtual instrument middleware and stuff as well, maybe.
We've talked about it before on the show. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a piece of software that you plug a bunch of third-party vendors. Like you can have orchestral stuff like flutes or guitars or French horns or whatever the heck, really sound designy stuff. And it all comes with like a script in the back end that kind of controls everything that you do. And if I don't like something and it's not a locked instrument, I'll open up the wrench icon and rescript it myself to be how I want it to be. Because sometimes they just limit things too much, or literally one thing could be different and it'd make my job so much easier. So I just do that.
I mean, that's cool to have the ability to do that. You've actually worked on instruments for Contact before, like not specifically. I don't know if you've worked for Native Instruments, but you've made Contact based instruments before.
Yeah, I have. I've done some on my own. I've worked with Embertone. I've worked with Audio Ollie sometimes, and I work with Performance Samples now. These days, because I'm so busy with writing music, I kind of keep that stuff a little bit close to the chest with regards to who I work with, just like friends and stuff. Like, oh man, this guy I know, like for instance, Performance Samples. Jasper Blanc is working on some really incredible, groundbreaking orchestral sampling these days, and to me, that's exciting to be a part of. So we work together quite a bit, and I think he's, like I said, he's really gifted at that. So it makes it kind of worth the little hobby-esque side projects.
I mean, yeah, that's cool to hear about. I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm not going to be like, what's he working on? But, you know, is there a timeline for when we might hear that? Obviously, he'll probably just going to take as much as he needs to take time-wise.
Right.
But
he's been releasing quite a bit of stuff, I'd say, over the past 2 or 3 years. It's kind of been very focused, like, oh, this library does really well at repeated string notes and et cetera, like stuff like that. But he's already announced it, but he's working on a whole collection called the Pacific Orchestra. And it's full collections, not just very specific oriented things like repeated notes. So the strings, I believe, are coming out this month, finally. They'll be the first release of the Pacific Orchestra. And he's got a ton of examples on SoundCloud that you can check out. They're incredible. I think you'll be able to hear the tone and all that stuff that he's going for. But it's performance samples on SoundCloud, performancesamples.com. You can listen to the same examples there on his website too.
yeah, I'm going to pull that up in case we need to have that for reference later. But yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty exciting. I mean, I'm more, between me and Steve, I'm more of the using contact samples kind of guy. So this is all like,
Nice.
This sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
yeah, a lot of people like to use a lot of hyperbole in their marketing these days. And don't get me wrong, most of these big companies are awesome, like Spitfire Audio and Cinesamples. They make some really great stuff. But after like the 12th string library, they can only say it's the best of all time, forever, always. And Jasper is very candid and off the cuff of like, here's actually every problem with this library. And I say that gently with quotes here, because he'll be like, oh, there might be a bump in audio, something here, or there's a click here, or we don't normalize our samples, or just stuff like that people might not like. He's very upfront with things like that. And I love like his very raw examples and his non-bullshit take on marketing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
yeah, I mean, that's definitely refreshing. And I think that's interesting, the way that you say that, because what I'm hearing is, I don't know if Jasper has this kind of background or anything, but the fact that he's going, okay, looking at something that exists that is good and people like it and use it a lot, and saying, yeah, but I wish we had, X, Y, Z. He's basically a programmer. Just he's like the lead programmer in that sense. That's a very programmatic mindset to have about something like that.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the entrepreneurial spirit behind most things. Like, either I wish this existed, or I wish a better version of this thing existed, and then you sort of just go on that adventure.
Yeah, because I mean, you're not going to reinvent the wheel probably at this point. You can fill in the blanks though. You could be like, what if the wheel had cool stuff on it that it doesn't already have?
Yeah.
So you probably do that, but yeah, I think sort of what this makes me think of when you talk about, because it's an interesting position that you're in terms of how, you talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, and in terms of, okay, I want this thing to go this certain way as a musician or a programmer or something. I think that kind of relates. I got to really get to the point here. I'm like trying to figure out how I'm going to say this. But when you're trying to come up with direction for something, that's obviously you as a composer are in sort of a weird place, because you have to take direction from someone else. Typically, if you're doing for media or it's not your own thing, you have to take direction from somebody else. And then if you're working with other musicians, if collaborators or work for hire situation, you have to then direct them, as to what, like, your vision combined with the vision being given to you is. So kind of on that note, I guess I kind of have like a multifaceted sort of, like my notes are like a mess. They're just huge just lumps of text. I'm like, wait, well, how was I going to say this to him? But,
you should see the upcoming episode I had with Dennis McNally, man. I was going on I was just stuttering rants and asking a question.
But I guess okay, so let's talk about like the intake part of, okay, a client comes to you and says, I want this, this, and this. Do you tend to, because, for example, I mean, I think the most obvious one is, with Capcom, like for some of the stuff that you did, they said, pop rock, and some of the other stuff they did, they said like do this, this, and that, and the other thing. Do you think that your workflow responds? Your workflow is more suited to more general direction of just like give me this, this, and that, or you think it's more like, oh no, I do better with, or I work more smoothly when I get like really specific stuff and I have to sort of like work within limitations and I have to sort of subvert those limitations and or do you even have a preference?
I don't. Well, preference, of course, is always the more loose approach. But I'm fine with both. I always realize that at the end of the day, it's not my product. I'm helping somebody else facilitate their view, and maybe they want my voice involved or not. That's totally fine. I actually recently, earlier this year, right before our son was born, I had this job that I had to hurry. I had like a week to do it. It was a quick turnaround. It was a song. It's not been released yet, but essentially I gave them my version. I'm like, oh, this kind of thing would be cool. And they're like, no, do the temp. I'm like, you got it. Hands off. I'm going to do the temp. I did still my slight twist on it, but I really had to make a pretty strong right turn to get that away from what I was doing. And you can kind of contradict that with Capcom, for instance. Whenever I worked with Virgil's theme, they sent me like, I want to say like 10, 12, 15 references that went everywhere from like 2014 EDM rock to like 90s Pantera. They had absolutely nothing to do with each other. And the examples were all over the place, but I kind of got a flavor of what they were looking for. And I brought that into modern day examples and a little bit more, Capcom / Devil May Cry oriented. And they were totally on board. They let me do my weird thing and they were all for it. So yeah, I've had examples all over the place and both can be fun in their own way.
I mean, yeah, that's awesome. That's cool that you were given, the sort of the freedom to kind of run with that. But, when you do get direction, I'm kind of curious as to, do you respond to, or like, do you respond more to like, technical, musical, production based kind of like, okay, give it, make sure that, this sounds really, this sounds a certain way and we want this, and that in terms of, I don't know. I'm trying to, like, in terms of this is the kind of arrangement that we want, and this is, we kind of want the strings playing a more lighter thing, and we want the contrast that with horns doing heavier stuff, or do you respond more to, like, make it sound happy, make it sound angsty, make it more like pathological direction versus, like, technical direction?
Yeah, I prefer the pathological, more emotive descriptions, of course. Yeah, I don't want someone to be like, hey, make that in 6/8, make sure it's a shuffle beat, make sure it's in G sharp minor. And I'm just like, dog, what? Like, you want to write this?
At that point, it basically is. It's kind of over the top. But when like another one that I hear a lot that some people really hate it and some people really love it. I used to hate it and I kind of love it. Is like really abstract direction, where like make it sound spicy or like colorful or wavy. It's like
green is a good green.
Like, do you like those, or do you go like, or
it depends.
How do you deal with
if we're on like version 1 or version 2, I love it. If I'm on version 20 and someone's like, could you make that snare sound more purple? I'm like, oh God.
That's actually interesting. I never thought of it like that, because no one talks about like where I am. Oh, where am I in the production? It's like, oh no, they just usually kind of get a yes or no answer on that one. Whereas like I never thought about it in terms of like where you're at in the timeline. But,
I actually don't mind. One thing I've heard that people enjoy about the way that I work is how iterative I am and how quick I am about giving ideas. Because the one thing I like to do is I like to work with people that let me fail. And music is so much failing is involved, especially in the beginning when you're getting out ideas, and you kind of, especially if you're starting to get like some of your first big gigs, the last thing you want to do is look like some, useless chump to some audio director that you don't know what you're doing, or a hack, or just anything to sort of make you feel like you're just not ready for the job. But the thing is I've tried to relax that a bit. Just like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? Just get the conversation started, and then we start to polish corners. Once I get an idea of what somebody likes, it's usually easier for me to sort of start to push forward with some different stuff. I feel like I went on so much of a tangent, I don't even remember what the question was anymore.
You was talking about emotive versus direct critiques.
That was a great answer. I mean, I think that was like, I think that's a pretty pretty much sums it up. But
yeah, I know some people like to they get a direction from a director, they'll hide for a week or two trying to craft the most perfect thing, and then by then you've heard it 1,000 times, and then you have a hard time getting it out of your head if they send you the note of no, I don't like that. It's so much harder to be like, oh no, I've heard that for 2 weeks now or a week now, and now I don't know how to score this scene, or I don't know how to approach this song because I can't get my own shit out of my head. And also it's just a time suck. You just lost 2 weeks on a job. So for me, I'm like, I hope I can get them an idea by 2 or 3 days in and be like, what do you think about that? So yeah.
So quick turnaround on ideas, getting the feel for what they want, pretty soon, kind of going from the big abstract to the small. These are kind of the big abstract stuff to the small, more defined stuff, polishing the corners, as you put it, that's more of your process of doing it. Because I was listening to your stuff before this, and I was like, yeah, this is there's all sorts of stuff going on here. There's lots of different influences, clearly, either because the client said so or because he thought so or something. And I was like, I gotta ask him these questions and find out how this all works, because this is like. But that said, you are kind of like what I was saying earlier. Is you are sometimes in the director's chair, and you have to tell other people how to do their jobs, or not how to do their jobs, but how to meet the needs of the project.
I think at that point, I like to be the same director, in quotes here, that I like to work with, which is it's still a collaborative effort. You're still hiring them for something that you don't know how to do or don't have the time to do, we'll say. And then usually you get the best out of people when you let them do their thing. So like, for instance, if I'm hiring string players for Virgil, we're hiring Victor to sing on it. I wrote all the melodies. I notated everything in finale for the string players, etc. But if they do something that I think is great, and I always try to give them the space to do this, then please experiment in some way with any of these ideas that are on paper and let me hear them. Now, of course, I'll do the same thing that a director would do to me, and I would make the final call on what I think is the right judgment. But giving people space to collaborate is, I think, going to give you a better end product.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because that was all my next question, and it even had like the Victor Vorba example and everything. So congratulations, you're also psychic. that is another talent you can add to your resume. I was like, well, there goes that question.
Right. Well, I think I talked a little bit about one of my live streams that I did with him when I was breaking down the production on my YouTube channel, and he did some wonderful inflections. He still stayed on notes. Like he did a few cool like turns or added slides in places that I just didn't think about, because I'm not a good singer by any stretch of the imagination. So nothing about that is really idiomatic to me. I'm just thinking like notes, essentially. Yeah, and he brought it to the next level. Some of those things I never would have asked for, or wouldn't have thought to ask for even.
But that's awesome. That's such a cool feeling as someone who's like, okay, you've been sitting with this thing for a long time.
Yeah.
And, you're just like, oh, I'm working on this thing and, plugging it out and doing all my stuff. Time to bring other people on. And then they just like give this breath of fresh air to it. And you're like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, it's a new look on it. I am not necessarily enjoying working on it. Again, you usually enjoy working on it, but it's like you kind of get out of that, like inside your own headspace, and you're like, oh, I have this new thing to go with, and I have new ideas and directions to go in. It's the beauty of collaboration, man. It's just how music is, dude.
I think Victor had to deal with a little bit of the other side of me too, which was I think I've talked about this before in the past as well, where it's like I have a very specific idea, especially when it comes to like vocals or phrasing and stuff like that. Like, oh, you can't breathe there. I'm sorry, but like, can you like sing that without taking a breath, or don't make that inflection here, or that A needs to be a tall A, not a small A. Like things like that start happening, or like 2 weeks later, I'm like, hey, I changed one word in this verse because it sounds better. Can we re-record the whole thing? So there's a process involved, and I'm very obsessive and OCD about especially lyrics, because you have to say them, they need to feel right, they need to sing right, which is the thing a lot of lyricists like to talk about. And sometimes you have to replace a word, and it just makes it come to life so much better. And the unfortunate part of that is re-recording the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a Band-Aid. I feel like that's a Band-Aid you got to rip off early. Like as soon as you get the kind of feeling of this needs to be re-recorded, it's like don't prolong it, because you don't want to be like weeks down the line and then hey, can you please sing this thing again that we sang weeks ago or something?
Yeah. Then you get the temp. What was that? Temp
Love.
Temp Love. Yeah. We're like, no, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. No, I was definitely very guilty of that early on. But like you just said, I remember I had to rip that Band-Aid off a lot. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm sitting here contemplating how I'm going to fix this or why I want to fix this. I need to just fix it. It needs to just be fixed. Rip it off, get started, and you just finish it so much quicker.
Yeah, no, for sure. But kind of going back to one of the things you said is with lyrics, you're I guess obsessive in your words about them. But I in the sort of, when I was looking into, how, what I should talk about on this thing and looking into your background and stuff, you mentioned that you like to go on walks to think about stuff and get sort of fresh air and think. Is that like your only way or your main way of doing that and kind of refreshing yourself and getting ideas, or do you have other stuff that you like to do?
I don't go on walks as much these days just because I need to be home so much. So I will say I miss that a great deal because I guess the way the phrasing goes is some people just say you need to walk through a door to help your brain come up with new ideas. That can be just leaving your studio and going, for me, to the living room or something here, since my studio is in my house. But I really like getting out and going for a walk because it's just sort of like mindless movement. My lizard brain can make me breathe and walk my legs to where I need to go. And my brain, the creative part of it, knows the path so well. I can just think about the music that I'm working on. And being outside means I'm not going to be checking my phone or social media or my computer. I'm not going to be watching YouTube videos. I'm not going to hear anybody talking on the phone or anything else in the house. So yeah, I liked walking for that purpose. There was a little bit of, getting some vitamin D was nice too. Getting out into the sun, because all I do is sit in my little troll cave all day and write music. Yeah, no, I really enjoy walks, but you can do it just by leaving the room that you're in, I think. Sometimes just going, taking a shower, going into the bedroom and shutting all the blinds and laying there in the dark for a second. I don't know. There's all kinds of different ways to deal with it. But for me, I do like walks quite a bit.
Yeah, all those examples kind of have that sort of mindfulness attitude or or approach. Like it's more meditative in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it, actually.
Yeah.
It is really meditative. I'm not really thinking about anything other than like one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting and kind of difficult for a lot of people to do and figure out. But it's once you kind of get your own, you figure it out and like, oh, this is what gets the juices flowing. It becomes a lot easier for sure. But yeah, on.
I can add one more part to that if it helps. I think it also helps with creative limitations, which people always say whenever someone tells you can do anything that you want to do for a project. It's way harder for me to get started if someone's like, no, I want to do an acoustic guitar and a cello piece. It's like, great, I already have some limitations involved. I know exactly what to think about. And when I go for a walk, I remove the idea of every sound that I have in my computer, which is tens of thousands of samples and instruments and all kinds of stuff. And I just move away from everything except for what's in my mind and the overall impression that I want to write. Like, what am I trying to convey? I start with like this big macro picture, and then I'm able to like narrow it down before I even touch an instrument, which really helps me write a lot faster. Because if I just sit down and start writing on piano or writing on guitar, I'm going to do what's idiomatic to the piano. I'm going to do what's idiomatic to the guitar, and I'm going to put myself in a box pretty quick.
That's so interesting because we've had people come on here and say like literally the opposite of that. So that's like, I don't know. I think it's kind of cool that we have like people who, no, I don't vibe with that. Other people are like, that's my jam. Cause like, when we had a Disaster Piece, Richard Vreeland on the show, he talks about like, he's like takes like an impressionistic approach to things. Like if you look at like Hyperlight Drifter and the main theme, he was like, yeah, I just sat at the piano and he's like, piano isn't his main deal. I guess guitar is, much like yourself. And he's just like, yeah, I just like put my fingers on the piano and let things happen. And it feels like very impressionistic painting. And that's how I come up with my big ideas before I refine them down. I'm like, that's cool. And then you told me about how you do it. I'm like, that's cool.
I think there's no right or wrong way, right? First of all,
no, it's not.
Rich's music is incredible. And I love his music on It Follows and Hyperlight Drifter. They're both incredible soundtracks. But I've done that version too. Sometimes it's either deadline oriented or maybe you just immediately get an idea and you want to start touching something. For Virgil, I did not get that. I needed to go for those walks. I needed that space to figure something out. But yeah, like what's a good example of? I worked on a short called Spooky Fresh, and it was orchestral based, and it was full of '90s nostalgia. And I grew up around that so much, I just immediately was like busting up with ideas, and I needed my piano in front of me right then. Like I needed to work it out, but I already had a sound palette, right? '90s orchestral music.
Right.
It wasn't something I really needed to figure out. But to think about Rich's music, because he uses non-traditional palettes in very interesting ways. So I think that's still really cool. And I've definitely stumbled onto things by accident that are cool by doing that.
Oh yeah, I think that's a big important part of the creative process is the whole like accidental sort of oh I wrote this, I didn't just accidentally find it, this came from me. But yeah, I mean I guess it does in a way. It's you're sort of working with your subconscious or whatever you think is not your like purposeful doing of something and letting that sort of take over, which is hard for me to do personally. There's a lot of different exercises and tricking of myself I have to do to get there, but and that can also get interesting. It's weird, but yeah, I mean, no, that's kind of what I want people to be on this show for, is to explain like what are different creative processes like, and why do you do it this way, and why do they do it that way? What do you think of other people's processes and stuff? And so people can listen to this and go, oh, this is a thing I can try. I never tried that before. Maybe this would work better for me. And, hopefully they can find something like that. And,
I think another part of like you said earlier, you used the word obsessive. I think I've always kind of been like this, but I like to really envelop myself in the world of whatever I'm working on. I can't really put myself into the world of Devil May Cry, but I can watch, every cutscene I possibly can. I can read the mangas. I can look at the artwork. I can listen to some past music. I just do everything I can to get in that headspace of feeling that way and just thinking in that world, if that helps at all make any sense to what I'm trying to say.
It does.
I just
it does, yeah.
As much as I can envelop myself in any sort of project that I'm working on, I can. Or I do, sorry.
No, yeah, I think that's kind of. I'm sorry, Steve. What were you gonna say?
Oh, that works for me when I'm playing games. When the pandemic kind of took hold, I basically hunkered down and caught up. I wasn't really a video game player because as much as the money I can invest into a video game console and play, I always thought that was like I actually have to do things and buy money for gear that I actually have to make a living. When that all kind of flattened out, I think I borrowed some consoles and basically replayed most of all these classic PS3 games. I'd never. I'm just learning about Assassin's Creed and all these different games. Being a kind of a history buff, as it were, I ended up like reading having like audiobooks and great courses series and just like learning about the worlds I'm in while I'm playing the game was a more immersive experience. It allows when you're doing things like grinding in games, it makes the grinding experience a little bit more tolerable, or at least that you're not completely killing time. You're feeding some information in your brain. You're constantly learning something. So
totally.
I wanted to add
I remember back whenever God, I hate to say it, so douchey, but back when The Walking Dead was cool and good, I remember it was about around the same time that I finally got to play the Red Dead Redemption 2. They had the Undead Nightmare, the zombie DLC for that. Mm-hmm. I was like knee deep in like Walking Dead season 3 or something like that. Like the show was still interesting to me and I was enjoying it. And then all of a sudden I jumped into this massive open world zombie storyline and I felt very connected and I was having so much fun. I was really vibing off the two coexisting at different parts of my life.
Yeah. I mean, that can definitely that's another interesting thing, is if, you can do the thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to be writing for, an existing universe. I'm going to immerse myself in that universe, go back and play all the games. But also it's like, okay, if you run out of gas there, it's like, let me just go into all the genre. Let me go into that and just, explode my brain with those things and see where that goes. Mm-hmm. But, it's kind of...
It's like method acting.
Yeah, it's method acting for music. Kind of.
100%. I know, if I switch gears to more traditional orchestral music, which is how I started out, it takes me about a day if I can handle it or if I have the time and it's not like a really hard deadline or something. I like to take a day, do just score study, listen to just traditional music, I'll follow along to the scores, get really into that world, mess around with the piano a little bit, sort of recalibrate my brain for that harmony, that style of melodic writing. It's just different than writing like neuro bass or metal. I need to switch those gears a little bit.
So yeah, sort of force yourself into a different mindset and like, you know, get out of, okay, I don't know. I would do that like in college. I would do that with like when I had juries for like musical stuff, and it's like, okay, you got to play like what do I have to do for like my last one? What was it? I had to do Straight No Chaser. It was the Thelonious Monk. It was the Monk version of Straight No Chaser, and I was like, I've only listened to Monk for like a week. I was like, I'm not gonna listen to anything else but this because I'm gonna like I don't want to like poison my brain with like rock music or just or anything like that. I'm just like, oh no, I'm gonna screw up my juries, which is a kind of a neurotic and silly.
He now warms up with
back
that
on
now. Like
What's that?
It's just this warm up tune. He's like, you know, tunes his bass and then starts playing Straight No Chaser.
Oh yeah, I've been permanently damaged.
You gave me PTSD. I haven't thought about my college juries in a very long time, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, anytime I bring that up, people are like, "Why did you bring that up?" I'm like, "Sorry, I got to stop doing that."
As you said, I don't know how you know this, but guitar is my main instrument. But in college, I decided for some reason, I'm so glad I did it. It felt so stupid looking back, making that decision at that time. But I was like, I'm going to learn how to play piano. I've never played piano, and I'm going to learn how to play piano. And in my school, like, it was very traditional in the fact that there was no like media program or anything like that. And you had to pick an instrument to graduate with, and you had to get to a certain proficiency before they allowed you to graduate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I had to be way better than I ever wanted to be to graduate at the piano. I never really quite got there, but man, bless them for letting me. I still had to give the piano recital. I had to play Beethoven and Prokofiev and Debussy, and it still haunts me to this. I still have nightmares about preparing for that recital. Every jury. I still have what I call composer chops. I can fake my way through some difficult passages, okay, yeah. But that's it. My sight reading is garbage. Everything else is garbage. I just have some kind of like quasi technique to get through things.
Ryan and I met at the same. We were all with the same program together. I remember walking through the halls in the practice rooms, and there'd be just everybody playing like Rachmaninoff and you know, like super like Franz Liszt and stuff, and I would walk with this sort of, and I was a piano major, or my instrument was piano as well, and mostly because it was the only thing I actually could sight read or at least read, because I'm more of a proficient drummer, but I can't read percussion that well, and I didn't really want to go through that sort of like just do walking through the halls. I had like sort of an imposter syndrome. Or I'm just like, I don't belong here. I don't belong here.
You made it though.
I did. I made it, but
luckily, all the piano students there, they knew me and they were really nice, because I would ask them like, "Hey, could you play this for me? I wrote something on piano. I'm garbage," and they would be nice enough to read through it for me. And they were really, really nice people. And they were like, "Dude, I don't know why you're doing this to yourself."
That's what music school is. It's just like, why are you doing this to yourself?
Honestly, if you're not planning on getting a doctorate in music, like even with a master's degree, teaching is difficult to get a job. They want you to have a doctorate, and it's like a doctorate in music. You spend so much money just to teach. Like, I don't know, man. That's pedagogy of music is just like a whole subject that I just do not understand at all. But I've seen people do it well, and I'm very impressed that they can be taught to teach so well, because I feel like the only thing I learned in college was how to teach myself, which is still important. I think everybody should leave their educational backgrounds or their tenures anywhere with that impression. Like, they teach you to teach yourself. Of course, they teach you other things along the way, but that's just to get you interested, I think, to teach you how to teach yourself when you leave.
If you become a better thinker post bachelorate, you're probably in a better place.
But those people that know how to teach other people really well, I'm very impressed. They have not only the patience of dealing with beginners or just any level of anything, but they're just so, as I'm stuttering through trying to explain this, they're very precise at figuring out exactly how to deliver the message that student needs to hear to get the point across. Like some master student came in and did like a kindergarten music class, and I felt like I learned something, and I was, in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So.
But that brings up an interesting point, because you don't. It's not teaching, but you instruct other people on how to do things. Like you said, you're more hands off, and you're not teaching them the fundamentals of doing something. But when it comes to like teaching versus directing or instructing, like why do you think that you? I mean, obviously not that you necessarily. Maybe you just don't have the desire to teach, which is fine. But like, what do you think is the sort of like the arcane quality of teaching? It's like, wow, I can do this, but like I can instruct in this way, but not in that way. Like, what do you think is the block there or the divide?
The subjective nature of it. I know that I have, if someone's like, what's your favorite orchestral repertoire? I'm immediately going to give them my own personal preference. And I feel like that's so limiting. The things that I might tell them to study is just things that I've encountered. I don't think I've listened to a ton of music and I love writing a ton of music, but I still think within that sense and that spectrum, I have my version of everything. I think if I had started teaching around now, maybe in 10 years, I'd be worth some weight of salt. I would know better about how to lead people down paths that's not just my path. So that's usually why I choose not to teach. It sounds fun. I love the idea of helping people out, but I don't really know how to do it well. I don't think. I've never done it. So
right, but I mean, you help people out in your own way. You help bring people's visions to life, and add your vision to something. I think that still counts for something. That's not I think they're just different, and it's not really like not helping people. Well, we can feel that way. It's weird as an artist sometimes, but that's a different.
Most of the time, my job is to give non-musicians music. To teach a musician music, I feel like is just a different part of my brain that I'm not ready to succumb to.
Neither am I.
Yeah, it feels like a hefty burden to not fuck up.
Which is interesting because people who I keep doing this bullshit. I'm just like, but the other side of things, like it's interesting because people who teach music might go, this is easy. I just go through all the Bach cantatas and I'm just like, hey, people learn this, and transcribe them and learn why things are the way they are in modern music theory, in Western music theory. Whereas for you, it's like, oh man, you have this like subjective thing. You have to interpret people's ideas, and this is going to be in a video game or a movie that's going to be seen or played by millions of people, and that's a lot of pressure. How do you do that? So it's kind of interesting to see. Like on the other hand, it's like, oh man, it can. I guess either can be daunting. I guess it just depends on how your brain works. I said a whole lot of nothing just there.
I think I could help build the foundation of a house. I think I could lay down the concrete in which a foundation of a house would be built on. Like you said, like these are your scales, these are your modes. This is all the little nuanced, bullshit you have to learn when you're reading about stuff, like knowing what scale degrees are and all this other stuff. The music theory stuff is really fun, but at the end of the day, it should just be a vocabulary that you use and not a rule book. For the love of God, don't ever use this as a rule book unless you're doing species counterpoint for some Baroque idiot somewhere who wants that. You don't really need a rule book. This isn't 5-point counterpoint, 5-part
right.
counterpoint. And voice leading is important, but to what degree? John Williams uses parallel fifths all the time. Does that mean we can or can't just because Mozart didn't? And there's all kinds of like weird paths. That's what I'm saying. There's so many paths to travel down when it comes to music pedagogy. I just don't know. As you can tell, I feel very scattered.
Me
too.
You're giving me flashbacks of like
me too.
platitudes and tropes and cliches that I'd hear in school, where it'd be like, "Did you know Bach invented jazz?" And we got to learn the rules to break the rules. Those sort of things. As far as diatonic harmonies are concerned. But yeah.
I agree with some of that to a certain extent, but not all of it.
I mean, they're not wrong, but it's also like things I've heard so many times that it becomes like, it's sort of like a secret code of like, I know what I'm talking about kind of things.
Yeah. I like music theory to the extent that it helps me communicate to musicians quickly. Mm-hmm. I don't have to like, hey, the seventh note after the D flat, could you play this chord? I can just play. Yeah, if I'm just like playing like a C alt 7 chord with a 9 on top or something, I don't know. Give me a flat 2 or flat 9, whatever. Like you can communicate these ideas quickly, or you can say like, go to the exposition of Mozart's whatever the heck, and they know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. After that, I don't really think about too much theory when I'm writing.
No, a lot of the people we talk to on here don't. I think that's kind of like, I'm not saying it's like archaic. I think it has its place, but like I think just with the way technology has improved and things have gotten, I think a lot of people have kind of drifted towards like I could just, because music, the written musical notation came about in a time where it's like you couldn't record stuff. You just had to like, this is the best I can write it out, and this is the best I can convey it to someone. Hopefully it translates, and we're going to be really kind of as strict as we can about it, even though some of that stuff is like lost to time. Like no one's going to know how to play certain things from like the Baroque era as they were at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Either because they don't use those instruments anymore, or they're made out of different
pretty
stuff,
archaic
or
too.
yeah,
like,
or
especially
exactly, or
medieval
the
stuff.
notation has changed. So you like look at that, and it's like, I guess this is how it sounds, and we'll try to recreate it. Sounds nice enough as it is, but yeah, with musical notation, it's like, well, now you can just record it and send it to them and be like, here's some MIDI. Play this, but with more, the way you would play it. Victor, you sing it with the way you'd sing it. When he comes back with some cool slides and stuff, you're like, that's great.
Yeah.
It's not like, so it. I don't really. I think that's kind of probably the norm. I would venture to guess these days, but
yeah, and like you said, playing devil's advocate, there's some parts that I would still tell people like, well, it's not super important, but this 1% is important. Sure. Voice leading is really important to me, but not in the traditional sense of not breaking rules of like parallel octaves and dumb stuff like that.
No, I don't pay the one thing that I really get like and that really helps me get a sense of what kind of songwriters people are is like their voice leading. Because I know there's this video that I love it's 2 videos of the guitarist from, his name is Andy Partridge. He's the guitarist for the band XTC, which is like a late 70s, sort of 80s. Actually, they did stuff into like the 90s and stuff, but they're mainly known for 70s and 80s, sort of like new wavy stuff. And his just like, I can't play it for, I'm not going to like, hold on a second. I like have, but like, this isn't going to probably translate that well, but I got to put it like in the way of myself or else it's not going to read it. But like, he talks about like, okay, you might play like A and then like E, D, and then like E or something like simple like that. He's like, I can't play it any other way besides like A with like the bar with like, what's it called? Like the, I'm blanking. Hold on a second. But like I can't play it any way without like the bar without the F sharp on top, right?
Oh, like A minor 6 or A major 6, sorry.
Yeah, A major 6.
Yeah.
And then he goes like he can't play the like an E like without this. Like without what's it called? Like this chord shape.
The first inversion? That's what it looks like.
Yeah, he can't play the first inversion. And he's like, I can't play a D without reaching my thumb over and grabbing that F sharp on the bottom. So you get that like voice leading of A, and you get A flat or A, and you get G sharp, and you get F sharp. So it's like what's it called? So yeah, it's like he can't do it without doing that. And I see like my friends do that and stuff, and I watch them play, and I'm like, damn, that's so weird. He can't play like he always does this or he always does that, and it really tells me a lot about. Do you have that kind of stuff? I mean, you do, but do you know? Are you like aware of that kind of stuff in your own playing or writing?
Nothing that strict. No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm gonna start thinking about it now, and I'm gonna be like, oh my god, I do this all the time.
It makes you really self-conscious.
Yeah, I'm a big sucker for a flat 6 chord in a minor key, but who's not?
I'm not saying like necessarily using specific chords, because like I have one friend / client who I always tease him. I'm like, he's like a real metalhead. I'm like, you got to write a song where you don't use any of the frets with the dots on them. Like, no, you got to do it, man. He's like, I will one day. I'm like, you got to do it.
That's funny. I don't like restricting myself to keys too much.
No, it's
I feel pretty fluent. I hate playing an F on the guitar, but that's a different story.
Sure, it can be inconvenient.
Yeah. But other than that, I kind of just whatever. I'll tune my guitar, whatever fits best. The vocalist comes first. What's your range? I listened to a lot of Victor's YouTube videos before I chose D minor as the key for Virgil's song, just because I knew he could full chest hit that high D. And I'm like, well, we're using that. So D it is.
Yeah, I mean,
to be very guitar friendly.
But that's nice when that stuff kind of when that stuff comes about, and you sort of, like, okay, well, what can I make? I don't know. I like that. It's like, I'm going to make full use of this guy's range. Like, we're going to get our money's worth here. We're going to get Victor sing that high D. And also, it turns out to be really good for guitar playing. So that's really nice and convenient.
I mean, it could have easily been in C sharp minor and not been as fun. But we got lucky.
For sure. But this is like, I'm sorry, I just had like a weird burning question because like and I didn't want to miss it, and we keep like going on to other stuff, which like I don't know, cool, interesting stuff, but like I saw recently because I was doing recent. First of all, just let me clear on like how I know who you are and why we contacted you. Because people like some people come on here and they're like, "Did you just like randomly email?" I was like, "No. We like know who you are and we like your stuff and everything." So, like, I actually, you know what? I discovered you through Alex Mukala's podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, some people I'm sure like a lot of people know you through Devil May Cry and stuff like that. But I got that from I follow like I was like who's this funky bass man on Twitter, and he's like I got a podcast. I'm like I'm gonna listen to the Funky Bass Man's podcast, and then I go oh cool, this guy seems interesting. Let's talk to him. But yeah, and I found out about the Devil May Cry thing, and I found out about your other work that you've done, and the video game awards performances and stuff. But yeah, I was like, well, what's, and then like in the weeks leading up to this, and when I into contacting you before I contacted you and stuff, well, what's this guy worked on and stuff, and I saw that you worked on like a really cool thing for one of like my favorite YouTube channels right now, which is was it the Son of a Dungeon thing?
Yeah,
which I was like, this is weird in a cool way, but I was like, this is weird because I was like, man, this is like a multimedia thing almost, where you have like these guys. I'm blanking. It starts with a C. What's the channel called again?
It's Corridor Digital.
Corridor Digital. Yeah, they do like the Bosstown Dynamics videos. For those of you who are listening, they do the quote unquote Bosstown Dynamics videos where they like, make the horrifying like robot rebellion stuff, and and they have like they did like the Luke Skywalker redux for the Mandalorian thing. They do cool stuff. They're really talented. But the Son of a Dungeon thing, I was like, this is wild. You've got to do like, there's scenes where there's just round table talk, guys playing Dungeons and Dragons or people playing Dungeons and Dragons. You have sort of like green screened CGI sequences. You've got like fully CGI sequences of like all animation. You've got like overworld sort of scene setting, kind of like almost menu screen type stuff. Like, I was going to ask more specific questions, but I'll just have one is like, how the hell did you even approach this? Like, how do you jump between these things? I know the music is like very like ambient at times and sort of in the background because they're talking a lot, but it's also very forward when it's like the theme and stuff or an action sequence. Like, where do you even start with something like that? That's such a... It seems like huge to me, like to sort of break it down.
It is. It was huge, and that sort of started the conversation of how are we going to do this? Because they were like, hey, well, the first question is always, well, what's the budget? And what are we going to do with that budget? And then I was given a number. I'm like, cool. Well, essentially what you're asking me to do is score 4 feature films for this amount of money because this is a giant, thing. So we can't do that. Nobody has time for that. You don't have time to wait for me to do that. And I don't have, really the necessary resources to complete that. So what we ended up doing was narrowing it down to what was the most important, which were character themes. There's 4 main characters. Each character has a theme. We had a main theme. We had some additional, like the rock version with the guitar and the drums that introduces the show as like a redux of the main theme, but shoved in like 10 seconds. So there's like little developmental pieces that are sprinkled throughout. And the way I delivered the main themes and then some of like we'll say like encounter or battle themes, which is like a video game would be, we did it in segments. So what I would do is I would write like 8 bars or something, and then I would go to the next part and I'd do that in 8 bars. And I would give them these overlapping or not non-overlapping segments so they could have the natural tails end out. So they'd get 8 bars. And if they wanted to go to any other section, they could do so in any order that they chose to drag it into the editing based on what was going on screen and how they wanted to edit it. So to me, I asked them, I was like, I think doing this as a more video game approach, but for linear editing is going to give you guys a lot more mileage and a lot more control over what you want, because I can't score every scene like it's a film. Nobody has time for that. So I just gave them character themes, encounters, main themes, and they just cut it up and used it however they wanted. And I think that ended up being the best approach because they had a whole bunch to work with but in a the music was very non-linear.
That reminds me a lot of I guess there's like I don't think we might have talked about this before. I think we talked about it on we might have talked about it with Rich, but it seems like a very like a vertical layering approach like you would find in certain video games. Like Nier Automata is a game that does that a lot. Is like you have these sort of ideas that sort of are adaptive and change and overlap and interact with each other based on, okay, this is gonna, because Dungeons and Dragons is like I'm sure, was it like shot and done by the time you got it, or were they like, hey, okay. So it's like a procedurally generated thing basically, because you got to roll the dice and make things happen.
I knew what the dungeon master knew as far as like where the storyline was going, but they hadn't finished the tabletop experience yet. The players hadn't made their decisions when I started writing. That's why I'm saying I couldn't score specific linear stuff, because by the time they edited all that together and gave me something, they would almost be a month or two out from release, and 4 feature films worth of material is just, it's a lot.
No, but that's a really interesting and sort of like, okay, we have to make this more efficient, and it has to make sense. It has to, I really wanted to know. I was like, how the hell did they go about? And now that I think about it, I look back on what I was watching, and I was like, okay, now I kind of see how I kind of see how the gears, which gear turns what other cog and thing, and how it works. And I was like, oh, okay, that's one way of doing it.
Yeah, I will say it made not made because it's not released yet, but it would have made the overall soundtrack release suffer quite a bit. Because one thing that I like to do is I like to develop things over a period of time for a linear listening experience. For instance, Virgil's theme inside the game is very different. Well, not very different, but it's probably like 20% different than the soundtrack release, which was on purpose. One thing I learned when I started working with Mick Gordon early on in my career, thankful for him to even give me a chance, was that we don't want to just take what's in the game, recut it up and put it into a soundtrack, because that's not the listening experience that we want them to have. That's not my intention. So I always try to approach things in a more custom, bespoke way. Like, well, what's the intention that I want to leave Son of a Dungeon listeners with if they're not watching the tabletop experience? And I'm working on that right now. Actually, right before I jumped on this call, I was working on one of those tracks. So I'm redoing sort of like the whole thing to be a little bit more enjoyable from a soundtrack perspective.
I'm glad you do that, because it is, for me, I listen to like my favorite soundtracks and composers and stuff when I'm playing a game or I'm watching a movie or something. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm gonna go listen to it on streaming, whatever streaming service anybody uses. Like, I'm gonna go listen to it on on my phone, computer, and then I like go and listen to it to like in my car or just to like hang out or whatever. And it's like, here's like this 18-second sting on here, like interspersed with all these different things. I'm not saying you have to make everything into a full song or like a full like strophic piece or like into like a full sort of structured thing, but it's like that was a really cool part, and I wish there was more of that. That would have been really cool. And it doesn't really translate to like a passive or I mean, it doesn't have to be a passive listening experience, but it doesn't really translate to like a listening for enjoyment kind of experience in a way. So especially that's cool. I'm glad you care about that.
Yeah, the Devil May Cry stuff, for instance, it's all battle track. It's you don't get a bridge. You don't get like to lay things down intensity wise for the sake of a song, because it doesn't fit the gameplay. You can't have some chill section come out of nowhere while you're slaying demons. It's not the the intensity vibe you're trying to give the player to keep them encouraged. But as far as listening in the car, we can get away with a 1-minute bridge with some really nice melodies and a guitar solo for whatever the fuck reason.
Yeah, no, that's a lot like our. That's pretty similar to what we had talked to Darren Korb about when we talked to him about Hades and stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, we basically, you have to create this, like I was kind of saying before, you have to create this adaptive thing that works with the game, and then when you put out your soundtrack, then you can do whatever, you can kind of change
Absolutely.
it up." So,
and really need to thank Capcom for letting me do that, because I remember the first time I did that with Devil Trigger, I didn't tell them. We just sort of showed up at remote control for the mixing part where they were coming into town, and the mixing engineer had prepared everything for me. And I was like, look, there's 3 different versions of this. And one of them is the soundtrack version. And I'm like, we're just going to play that for them when they get here and not the game version. And I remember seeing their reaction when we got to that bridge section, or like the really quiet and the side chainy pumpy vocal thing that we did for Devil Trigger in the bridge with Ali's voice. And they were like, oh, it's different. Like they were enjoying it. And then I had to explain to them, like, this is just for the soundtrack. That reaction you just had is what we hope listeners have when they get something offered in the same vein, but different. It's a listening experience on its own.
Have you ever done something like that? Because you mentioned this is like, or I mean, it seems like it's something that you do, like generally you're doing it. You've done it on at least 2 projects from what we've just talked about. But do you tend to like, what was it? Where am I going with this? Have you ever had a situation where you show somebody, yeah, here's like what the soundtrack version is going to sound like? They're like, this is awesome. No, put it in the game. Like this is, or put it in the movie or whatever. Like this is the version we want in it. Has that ever happened, or is that just
kind of with Son of a Dungeon, but not in that way? We were working on stuff. I'd already written the main theme and I'd given them their version that's all cut up. And then before it came out, I was already remaking the main theme for a listening experience. And they ended up using the OST version in most of their editing because they liked it more. Because I guess it just had a better flow to it, which I can't argue with. It definitely did. And they still use some of the segment versions, though, to get in and out of things, which is what they were made for. So I find that kind of funny that they found a way to coexist, and I had no one told me, which is usually the case. They're not going to run everything by me. They don't have to. But it was just like, oh, we're going to use this for this and this for this. And it's funny just to see them overlap in that way.
Yeah, I like cool kind of spontaneous stuff like that. It seems to be kind of a theme with what you do in terms of either working with other people or when either if you're on the end of, delivering something and they end up doing it with your stuff. But yeah, it's the magic of it, man. It's just like, wow, these things just happen out of music, dude. That's just the central theme of the podcast at this point. But no, I mean, that's actually, it reminds me a lot of, because you talked about working for Mick Gordon, and that's kind of what happened with a lot of because Steve and listeners who are not aware, Mick Gordon is the Doom. He does the Doom stuff. He does other stuff too, but he did the really.
A video from him or two.
Well, that's the thing is, it's funny because I was trying to go and look up because I was doing last minute research last night too. Like, I'm gonna make sure I'm prepared for this podcast, and I was watching you talk about the GDC talk. I was like, it was 1 in the morning. I'm like, and I had stuff to do before this, and I was like, shit, I'm not going to be able to go and watch this whole Mick Gordon thing again. I want to so bad, but I'm not going to be able to do it before the podcast.
It's so good. But, please give it a watch as soon as you can.
I know I have. I was like, I want to watch. I was like, I want to rewatch it before I go into this, and I was like, I'm not going to have time. But it's funny because Steve does not play the Doom games, and he does not really listen to a lot of metal music in terms of that really kind of modern sounding metal.
I accidentally wrote it once.
You accidentally wrote it once.
I was playing around in my first a free version of what's the composer software?
Finale.
Finale. Yeah. I think in college I had a free version of Finale, and I was like, let me see if I do this, and then I brought it to my post rock band at the time. They're like, oh, congratulations, you made a Doom score.
Nice.
Okay.
But yeah, it's funny because I actually made Steve Ludovico style, just you need to watch this Mick Gordon video. You need to watch this. It's just important. Everyone who is listening to this should watch it. It's really good. But
I will also add that I think, of course, Mick is known for Doom, and almost just as equally he's known for Killer Instinct. But some of his work on the Wolfenstein series and some other stuff he's done is really, he's an incredible producer, and he's equally, if not way more, obsessive and OCD about things than me and other composers, and we all really get into this. But he specifically has one track on the Wolfenstein 2 soundtrack called Horton Hears a Revolution. Please listen to it. It's like some kind of weird drunken acid trip, New Orleans-y, kind of Jimi Hendrix-y, kind of just lives in that vein somewhere of cool overly fuzzed guitars and sort of jazzy clarinets. It's crazy. It's one of my favorite pieces by him. It really shows his range in a pretty awesome way.
Yeah, I have that. I have that pulled up right now. I'm gonna listen to that afterwards because if I start playing it now, it's gonna start playing through my my interface, and it's gonna cause us copyright problems. So yeah, it's but yeah, no, he's great at that stuff. When I have watched him give talks and things, I'm like, I'll like look at this. I'm like, damn, I would never have thought of that in a million years. And then I'll also think like, damn, he like really gets in there and does little detailed stuff. I'm like, how does he get stuff done? This is so, it is a lot. This is like, oh, he goes down to like a molecular level on some of these things. It's really like wild to think like that he can, you know, I'm sure he's got his workflow and he's able to like obviously kick it out, but I'm like, yeah, that's I gotta go study harder.
I feel that way all the time, but that's a good way to feel.
It is, because you see those people who do that, and I'm like, who makes him feel like that? Like, damn.
I know, right? That's what I think too. Who makes him feel like that?
Who lights a fire under Mick Gordon's ass? Who does that? But yeah, that's no, it's super cool, and yeah, I'm definitely gonna check, because those games, like, man, those are way different. I mean, they're both like sci-fi, but they're like way different settings. Even Wolfenstein 1 to 2, you know, the most recent, I guess the most recent 2 games that he did are like vastly different settings, and you're just like, yeah, this guy is doing a lot of different stuff. So yeah, but that's kind of the fun of it, and you've mentioned that that's kind of the fun of it for you, is like you've talked about, you don't want to get, you know, you don't like to get too bogged down, I guess, with one sort of style, and you like to, you know, go all over the place and explore different things and merge those things together, and some of the stuff that we've obviously heard from you, but yeah, does there, but also working with limitations is cool. It's how do you, and sometimes those things get married. And it's just, I don't know where I'm going with this. Just
no,
like,
I definitely don't want to like getting pigeonholed. I don't mind someone being like, yo, that Devil May Cry track was sick. Can we want some rock music or some metal music for our game or our film or whatever. Could you jump on board? I like that. I don't like, hey, I thought that Virgil track was sick. I want something just like that for my thing. I'm like, nah, that's not how it works. Like, that was written because Devil May Cry influenced me to write in that way. Let me see your project and let me see how it influences me.
So that actually kind of answers my last question I had prepared, and also reminds me of kind of what Rich said, because, you know, Rich got known for the Fez soundtrack, and then he's like, oh yeah, then I got like It Follows, and It Follows, the guy was like, do this thing from Fez, and he was like, I can kind of do it, but I'm not gonna like just do the same thing, like, you know, I'm not just gonna give you the thing, because like what I said, like the kind of I'm gonna like not quite like cut you off. Like I'm gonna hedge off at the pass a little bit before you like read my mind again and do my last question for me. But you know, you talk about, that was one of the ways that you sort of prevent yourself from getting pigeonholed, as you put it, which is, I think, you know, that's a pretty accurate term. But you know, because okay, you kind of talked about on Alex's podcast is, yeah, I got the call with I got the jitters and the shaking and the fanboy, the hyperventilating, all that, which is cool. Yeah, if I got called by Devil May Cry, I'd do the same thing. But you know, by Capcom. But yeah, if I got called by them, yeah, of course. But now, yeah, okay, you put this thing out on, and you know, you go to what's it called, like the artist page for Casey Edwards on Spotify, and you see like, bam, tens of millions of listens on the Devil May Cry stuff, and I mean, pretty much all your stuff does at this point have like a few million listens. But you know, you've got tens of millions on these big tracks that you're known for. How do you deal with the onslaught of people going, do the thing, you know, hey, I love that thing you did, do it again, you know? And you kind of mentioned it, but how do you stay away from like, okay, yeah, I did this really big popular thing that really hit with a big audience, but I don't want to do that forever. I'm kind of the opposite of that. You know, Casey wants to do all kinds of stuff. You know, how do you prevent yourself from obviously not taking certain gigs or being really firm with clients who do want to hire you and say, show me your work first? But you know, it's something you have to kind of, or I don't know, it's not something you have to talk about, but it's something that you do talk about. But how do you prevent from getting like, okay, I'm the Devil Trigger guy. How do you stay away from that?
On a professional level, it's usually more if an audio director reaches out to me, then we have the same conversation that, you know, like Rich would have had on It Follows, which is, I can do some of the thing, but it's not going to match one-to-one what you want. I want to see your project and I want to see how we can make it yours. That's important. On a personal level, it's more of an experiment for me, because I would say like 95 or more % of the people that follow me on social media for any reason, whether it be YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, whatever the heck, is for Devil May Cry. It's the most popular thing I've done. I definitely don't want to ever try to undermine my own. What's the way of saying this? I'm glad they like it. I never want to be like, God, I'm so mad that got popular and people know who I am now. I think that's a really negative way to look at it. But at the same time, I do want to be known for more diverse reasons. And the only way I can do that is through experimentation by releasing stuff they don't expect and seeing how it fares with that audience. And if they don't like it, that's fine. But it also at the same time might grab people who are passing by for different reasons as well. And they might stay for that and continue to desire different stuff from me. So my wife and I, she sang on Devil Trigger. People love that track. Way more popular than I ever in a million years would have thought it would have been. It's kind of like a really weird butt rock, specifically angsty teen-like song. I don't get it, but I'm, like I said, happy that it exists outside the game so well for them. But we do tracks together too. Like we did one called Appetite. It's like kind of a dark industrial poppy thing that's very campy key-wise. It doesn't do a whole lot. Might not be people's jams. We did another song called I Need You Like, which is very like minimalistic pop, more of like a Selena Gomez kind of stuff. And that's the furthest thing that Devil May Cry fans probably want to hear, but some of them stuck around for it. And the most interesting one that I've done was Vacant Surrender, which was a personal release I did with Victor. And it is the closest thing that I've done to Devil May Cry so far, in the views or plays or whatever you want to say pale in comparison to Bury the Light. Is that just because of marketing reasons? I have no idea. I don't know if I'm putting it in front of enough people, or if they just don't care that it's not tied to Devil May Cry, or if they just never had a chance to know it even exists. I'm still trying to figure that part out. I'd say my career is still so young that I'm still trying to sort all that out in my own brain and see what people are here to listen to, because I like giving fans things that they like, but I also like doing things that I like to do. So I'm trying to find some kind of like fun middle ground, I guess, if that answers your question.
No, it does. It definitely does. I think that was I think that pretty much like made sense of everything I was trying to get at. But yeah, because on one hand it's weird because one of the many platitudes that we were we got in music school, because we went to music school specifically for like a program called Music Industry Studies. And it's like, okay, well, learn about the actual business of music. Because I was like, yeah, I know how to write and play and all that stuff. I'm going to learn how to do the business part. And one of the things they teach you is, yes, your work gets you work. Which is like, yeah, obviously, if you're like, yes, I did this massively popular thing, it's going to go at the top of my resume probably, but also I don't want to only be known for that thing. It's a very delicate dance you kind of have to do, and it can be hard to get out of. And I think a great way to do that, like how you kind of said, is to do something totally different. And make something totally your own, and be like, because it's hard to say, oh, you like this, here's this other thing, I also do this, and people are like, some people are going to be like, cool, great, yeah, and some people are like, all right, which is fine. I mean, everybody likes different stuff, but like you said, can't really complain about like I did this successful thing that people like and derived enjoyment from. But where I'm going with this is just like,
sometimes the chef special becomes the becomes a staple on the menu. Right?
Yeah,
food analogies. Yeah,
food analogies. Steve's. If I don't know how much of the podcast you listened to in the past, but Steve's forte, Steve's
analogies.
Pigeonhole is food analogies. The only thing he can do right. But yeah, it's that's basically it. But I mean, I definitely hope that people can see the other dimensions of what you do, and that you do stuff that gets way more popular than that stuff, or at least is has its own, and it has. I mean, the numbers are cool and stuff, but it's like, okay, that's kind of how it goes. Is whenever you have like, take like a pop artist or something, it's like, yes, you have your big hit, and then you're sort of like, your audience sort of contracts a little bit thereafter. You keep the diehards and sort of the people who are just pop music fans. Like, okay, yeah, I like the pop songs, whatever, like, or whatever's on the radio right now, like dancing in the club to this thing. And that they sort of like kind of disperse, and you have your diehard fans, and then you have to like sort of build out from there.
Yeah.
So that's it's an interesting process, and I mean, I'm interested. I mean, certainly between the Alex podcast and listening to your other stuff and the stuff that you've done with Victor and Ali and on your own, I'm like, oh, cool. Like I want more of this other stuff now. So I mean, I hope other people do that. I hope it happens.
Yeah, I'm figuring it out. It's an interesting balance that I'm just trying to understand. The whole music career thing is just, it's weird. It's fluid. It changes all the time. Yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to sort it out. I'm very thankful that at least professionally, Devil May Cry lets me start a lot of conversations with people who I shouldn't even be allowed to talk to. And I'm thankful for that. So maybe one day that'll lead to a more diverse portfolio. That's the plan.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. And you'll be able to turn down huge gigs because you're going to be like, I'm way too cool for that.
Never.
Yeah. No, we've had some of those on the show. I'm like, damn, you turned down that gig? Like,
Yeah, I've heard people. I'm like, dude, I don't like saying no too much just because I like writing in so many different styles. But I just sometimes, like you said, I hear the magnitude of jobs that some people turn down. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah. Our Disaster Piece episode has that. He's like, yeah, I turned down Death Stranding. I was like, I would do anything to like lick the shoes of the person doing the music for Death Stranding. Like that would be something like, damn. I hope you'd be able to just like smell the same air as in that studio. But yeah, that's I was like, all right. But yeah, that'd be. I certainly hope you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I can just, I mean, you kind of do. You're a busy guy at this point. I mean, you're especially with a kid, obviously, but like you seem like you're working on a lot of stuff, and you're like, oh, I want to get it all out. As far as your Twitter goes, anywhere, it's like I want to get it all out. And
I recently, I don't know if you saw, I just released a few days ago. I did something with Riot Games. I have some friends that write music over there. What a fucking incredible group of composers that work at Riot, by the way. Those are the light the fire under your ass kind of people.
Yeah, next level.
But one of them asked me to write a cinematic for one of their team fight tactics things, and I got to do some of like the more Henry Jackman-esque synth plus orchestra stuff that I've wanted to do so much of, and I was very thankful for that. And like I'm working on some game stuff that probably won't even be announced for 2 or 3 years from now, and people are gonna be like, oh, of course he got hired for that. So there's all kinds of stuff going on in my life that I'm still trying to break the mold, and some of it still fits in that mold, which is fine. I love both. I could write pop music all day. I could write metal music all day. I like writing orchestral music. Just don't make me write just one for the rest of my life, and I'll be fine.
Well, I mean, hey, I'm happy to hear that. I like, I love seeing more multifaceted composers, and I as someone who does like to listen to soundtracks and stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, they're doing the thing again. Even though I liked the thing last time, they're doing it again. I'm like, cool. This is someone who I want to follow and see, like, okay, what's next on the menu? Because there's going to be something else. Menu, food again. But
I dude, some of the pop music that's came out, I kind of lost touch with it from like 2010 to 2014. It just wasn't vibing with me. I just completely lost touch of that side of myself. But then I felt like some albums started coming out, like Sigrid is one of my favorite pop stars. Dua Lipa's last album, Future Nostalgia, is just like, when they even have like whole like reharmed jazz sections in some of their bridges, they're bringing some of that disco flavor back. It feels very original and fresh, and not just people putting out songs to make money. Charlie Puth is another great example. He's like the pop Jacob Collier. They're both like geniuses in their own right, but Jacob's like, no, I'm going to take like every S-curve zigzag thing you could possibly take. And Charlie's like, I'm going to do like Fast and Furious drifting, but in a straight line. It's like you can understand it, but it's still really cool. And you can hear like every now and again those jazz influences that he has from his time at Berkeley and stuff. And but it's very accessible and very popular pop music. Well, that was redundant, but yeah.
No, sure. I mean, but yeah, between 2010 to 2014, there's a lot of dubstep wub-wubs. Like, that was a lot of pop music back then. I just remember I was like, damn, walking through like, any public space. I'm like, yeah, right. They're doing the big halftime drop and the EDM thing again. All right.
That's sort of like the Hans Zimmer thing, right? Everybody's sick to death of the big Brahms horn sounds that they hear in trailers. And the thing is it's not his fault everybody wants to copy him. It's same thing with like Skrillex. What an incredibly like groundbreaking, future-looking producer. Did some really sick stuff that nobody was doing. It sounds cool. And then everybody does it to death, and you're just like, God, make it stop, please.
Yeah, it's nothing against the people, the pioneers or the originators.
Yeah.
Nothing against Hans Zimmer or Skrillex for me. Like, okay, dubstep blubs are fine. It's just like, all right, Taylor Swift is putting dubstep blubs in her song, and you got like that's like, all right, it's everywhere now. It's not cool anymore, man.
I'd say
But,
modern country is a good example of that because now it's very pop trap. If you listen to country these days, it doesn't really not to gatekeep in that way, but I just mean like the epitaph of the path of country did not make me think it was going to lead down trap hats for some reason. There's a lot of cross bleeding going on in some of these genres these days that I just never would have expected. And maybe there's a couple bass drops in a country song I don't know about.
So this is entirely subjective to like what we're fatigued with. I don't want everyone to think like their interests or the things they like are invalid or anything like that. It's fine. It's just for me and for you and Steve or whatever. Like we're just bitching about our own tastes personally. So I don't want anyone to take that personally. But there's oh man, what are they called? My friend not recently. This was like years ago. He showed me like this trap metal band, and I was like, this is actually kind of cool and interesting. And I can't remember what they're called.
I had some trap metal in Virgil's
there was
mood board, we'll say. I told you, they sent me a lot of weird references, but it kind of made its way in there in its own way.
Sure. No, I mean, that's I think it's great if you can sort of like blend, you know, things in that way that it's like and still make it make sense. But oh man, what is it? I'm trying to think of. Sorry, the country thing made me think. I'm like kind of jumping around all over the place, but there's this like, yeah, all right, I found it. Sorry. Have you seen the Sir Mash-a-Lot video about like the country songs where like layers like 6 country songs over each other and they're like all the same song?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, everyone go check that out. It's Sir Mash-a-Lot. Mind-blowing 6 country song mashup. It's hilarious. Whether you're a fan or not, if you know, it's fun to laugh at yourself. It's fun to laugh at whatever, you know, other people's stuff too. But yeah, it's a fun video. Yeah, Steve, you should check that out for sure. we'll watch it afterwards. But yeah, I mean, I think we've got some good post podcast. We got Steve. You got to do some show notes. We got like the Horton here's a revolution. We've got the country music thing. We've got the how to music really good. So yeah, we've got some fun like extracurricular homework for people to do. But I mean, I think you've pretty much answered all my questions, which admittedly went all over the place, and you know. It was like tying a bowline knot, like the little, you know, I don't know if anybody here besides Steve was in Boy Scouts. It's like the tree with the rabbit goes around the hole and up and through the, you know, all that stuff. It was all sorts of places, but I think
I specifically
it made
tell
sense.
people I'm not an Eagle Scout because I don't know my knots anymore.
All right, well, we're not going to start talking
Thank
about
you
knots.
for outing me. I appreciate that.
But yeah, it just went on all kind of goofy directions. I think we can sort of salvage something out of it, but we had some, I think you gave us some interesting things to think about. Thank you for joining us on this journey. But
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. No, we appreciate you coming on here and talking to us. I had some burning questions about like some stuff that I found very interesting in what you were working on and how you did it. And you know, I think that I answered my questions. But yeah, and I think you know what? Actually, we also reached out because the way I found you was Alex Mukula, and I was like, we should get him on the podcast too. And we're trying to get him on next. So that'll be kind of fun. No, he's great. He's I was like, this guy dancing around in this Yakuza jacket playing bass and then what's going on? And then, rabbit hole. Yeah. So yeah, it's fun. And I love that conversation. People should also check out your conversation with him on his podcast as well. It's fantastic. So, yeah, but thank you for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you so much.
Giving us your time and out of your busy schedule. You're a new dad. You're a busy composer. And
congratulations on parenting.
Congratulations.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.